Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition and another week here of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for being here yet again for yet another exciting week of talk, an exciting weekend of sports action we just had, both the NFL and college football, and I've got you covered for this Monday edition of the show. Going to start off, though, talking about tonight's game between the New Orleans Saints and the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football, and then we talk about the weekend of action that just transpired, going over some of my fantasy stars of both the NFL and college football weeks, and I'm also going to give you a little bit of a Heisman update as things are getting a little bit weird and wacky in that situation. And then finally, I'm going to conclude by giving you some fantasy advice, specifically in terms of starting and sitting certain players for tonight's game. Maybe you need one of those last-minute boosts to your fantasy squad to get over the hump, to get you that win for this week. But without further ado, I do want to remind you yet again to like, follow, and subscribe to put this show in the network. If you do feel so inclined, it is greatly appreciated by all of us here at the network, especially me and my fellow podcasters. We love hearing and receiving your feedback. And if you want to do it more contingent to this specific show, keep on making yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. They're a great way to contribute and interact with the show at large. You can press the $sign, contribute a tip, leave a comment, and I will read it here on air. Your personal opinion about what I say on the show, or maybe just something that you want to add to the show as a whole. Needless to say, everything you do for this show is greatly appreciated by me, and also by any of the fellow podcasters you might leave comments on their videos as well. I'm pretty sure they appreciate it just as much as me, and overall the network grows as a result. But without further ado, let's jump into that Monday Night Football preview. Should be a very weirdly exciting game, shall I say, between the New Orleans Saints and Kansas City Chiefs here. And what I mean by weirdly exciting is that there are a lot of storylines and there are a lot of players that can make the difference in this game. But we don't necessarily know how it's going to transpire, is what I mean. It could go many different ways. It could be a low-scoring game, now that you know both of these offenses aren't necessarily firing on all cylinders, or this could be the opportunity for someone on either team to break out and turn this into a real game. Let's start, with the obvious, the Chiefs here. The Chiefs, obviously, still undefeated, finding ways to win by hook or by crook, and as a result, still being perhaps the number one Super Bowl favorite right now. However, last week, Rashee Rice goes down, torn ACL, potentially out for the entire season, most likely out for the entire season, even if they get to the playoffs and make a deep playoff run. So, the big question turned into, who's going to step up? Will Xavier Worthy, a raw rookie who they kind of view as more of a gadget role kind of player, or even Travis Kelce, someone who is still one of Mahomes' favorite targets, but over the past couple of weeks, and not until last week against LA did he have a big game, has shown his age. So that's the big question that this Chiefs offense has to figure out. They still have a lot of depth. I like a guy like Justin Watson, very reliable receiver. He's not necessarily, that inspiring, so to speak, but he's still someone that moves the chains. He's still relied upon in this offense to make an occasional big play, and so he could be someone to keep an eye on. Juju Smith-Schuster was good for them a couple years ago in that Super Bowl run. This year, maybe not expected to hold as much of a big role as he is now that Rashee Rice has gone down, but maybe he could be the catalyst in this offense, but we still don't know. But as long as Patrick Mahomes is at the quarterback position, I expect that there is a chance that big plays will still happen in this offense, and the Chiefs offense will still find ways to win because it's Patrick Mahomes. On the Saints side of things, this is an offense that a lot of people were skeptical about coming into the season, as the first two games were performing at a historic rate. Derek Carr is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. His deep ball, which I said was his saving grace, like one of the best in the NFL, and every single offensive player was playing in sync. Over the past couple of weeks, though, their offense and defense has come under scrutiny with quote-unquote late game collapses in games they definitely could have won had, the entire team stuck to the game plan, if you know what I mean. In the game against Philly, they gave up two big plays, actually, to both Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert at the end of the game that led to the Eagles winning that game. And then in Atlanta, they also did it. And I feel like this Saints team is a good team. They just don't necessarily, I believe, have the nous to close out games they should win. Right now, they could also be undefeated coming into this game, and they could have the upper hand. But looking at the betting odds, which I haven't yet told you, there's a reason why Kansas City is still favored in this game. It's not just because they're at home. They are favored by 5.5 Kansas City. The over-under is 43.5. KC is minus 230 to win. New Orleans is plus 195. So as you can see, the Chiefs are still heavily favored. And the reason being is that the Chiefs have found ways to do this before. The Saints are just in an offensive slump that unless they show us that they can get out of it, we have to take as gospel. Because the Saints' offense has never been as convincing as the Chiefs have been, sans, superstar players throughout different years. So, whereas the Chiefs' kind of offensive woes and overcompensation for it is expected, we don't know how the Saints, more so still with the superstar players they've always had, but kind of more in a prove-it situation, will perform, if you know what I mean. That being said, this game still could be weird. And the big question for the Saints is, how is this offensive game plan going to look? Because we haven't even talked about the Chiefs' defense, which is still going to be very effective in this game. Steve Spagnuolo, one of the great defensive coordinators of all time, is always going to have a game plan, and it's going to involve pressuring Derek Carr. And my big question subsequently from that statement is whether or not Carr's deep ball can threaten this Chiefs secondary. The Chiefs secondary is one that I love, but still has the propensity to give up the big play. So, one of the bigger kind of components of this Saints offense has always been the Carr Rashid Shaheed deep ball connection. We saw it in the first couple of games where they had 2 long touchdowns in those 2 games to start up their season. And since it hasn't been as integral a part of what they're doing. Which leads into my second segment, or second point, about how the Saints offense could look. Alvin Kamara in this game. Because I feel like a large part of what the Saints want to do is predicated on whether or not Kamara can have a big game. Because let's say, their game plan is, we want to pound the rock with Kamara. We want to get him the football in early downs to kind of alleviate the pressure that Carr's going to be facing. And ultimately, once we feel like we can take a shot play down the field, it will be there for us. It will open up different avenues for Derek Carr to kind of hurt the Chiefs secondary. Then the other game plan is, if the Chiefs are going to pressure Carr, that will leave a lot of space behind the safeties or who's ever back there, the corners in their system to exploit as well. So it's going to be a different balance play by play for the Saints in this game. They either will lean on Kamara if the Chiefs are giving them that, or they feel like they can exploit the Chiefs secondary should the Chiefs come after Carr. And that's how I feel like this game will be even closer than people think. But in terms of my overall game pick, it would be silly of me, it would be foolish of me to overlook the Chiefs just because of potentially season-altering injury. I think that what the Chiefs learned last year is that potentially just having an all-world quarterback could be enough. Patrick Mahomes doesn't really care, I believe, who is on the field for him at the wide receiver position. He just cares about them getting open. I don't think his frustrations last year with the wide receiver core as a whole. It was frustration with their inability to get open for him, and thus that was where the tensions rose. This year, I feel it's a bit different. I feel like Patrick Mahomes is so focused on the task at hand for the Chiefs that he doesn't care about how, as Andre enters the chat, how are you doing, my friend? I don't necessarily think Patrick Mahomes really cares about whether or not, his wide receiver room is decimated. He just cares about the goal at hand. I know it kind of sounds selfish to say, well, he did feel like, after being a part of the injury to Rice. But at the end of the day, if you're Patrick Mahomes, I feel like you know your own abilities, and you know how this team is tailor-made to fit around it. You can find different ways to kind of exploit different teams without, relying on Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice was nice in that he was becoming that wide receiver one. But you don't necessarily need that if you're the Chiefs, and you don't need to panic. You still have the big play threat with Worthy. You still have a semi-reliable tight end, albeit an old one, in Travis Kelce. And you have supplementary pieces like Justin Watson and, Juju Smith-Schuster that could step up into these roles. Yes, their run game is also a big hit, but they don't necessarily utilize their running backs that often. And Kareem Hunt, is kind of a bell cow back who can wear down defenses if he needs to. So at the end of the day, I'm picking the Chiefs, and I think I'm going to stick with it. Because right now, the volatility of the Saints offense leads me to believe that, yes, they can stay in games, but can they win them with a complete performance? And I haven't seen that just yet. With the Chiefs, I kind of feel like they've been through this before. They know the task at hand, and they'll find ways to supplement the loss of Rashee Rice. But you don't have to take that as gospel. Let me know what you think in the comments, because it's going to be, like I said, a weird game. But on the other side of this quick break, we'll be right back to talk about my NFL fantasy stars of the weekend. I only have 3. I could have had even more, but these were the 3 guys that I truly believe took over the NFL weekend. We'll be right back to talk about them right after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the